The alarm hit my ears before I even opened my eyes. A sharp, pulsing shriek that cut through every wall of the pale fang and buried itself somewhere behind my skull. I rolled off my rest slab and hit the cold floor of my quarters, already moving, already reaching for the door panel. Krell. Torek's voice came through the calm but tight. Command relay. Priority signal. You need to see this. I did not answer. They knew better than to speak to me before I had seen whatever had woken us. The bridge of the Pale Fang was small but efficient. 12 stations, 12 hunters. Every one of them the best the Veshan Dominion had ever trained. I had selected them myself over 6 seasons of field trials, and not one of them had ever disappointed me. We had tracked Rithani warcruisers through nebulae so thick our sensors could barely function. We had chased Korvathi hive fleets into decaying orbits and watched them burn. We had cornered the eyeless monks of Palax 9 in their temple ships and dragged them out into the light. 40 species across this galaxy had learned the same lesson, and the lesson was simple. When the Veshan come for you, you do not fight, you do not hide, you kneel, or you cease to exist. I had never lost a target, not once in 40 years. Torek was standing at the primary sensor display when I arrived. He was my second, my oldest companion in the field. A lone vessel, unregistered, picked up by Sensor Net 7 near the outer boundary of the Orion Arm. It was broadcasting on an open channel, which was either brave or stupid. Its registry code was unfamiliar. "What is it?" I asked. "Human," Torek said. The word meant almost nothing to me at the time. I had heard of humans the way one hears of any minor species on the fringe. They were from a small, wet planet somewhere in this arm of the galaxy, a Class 1 civilization, pre-galactic. They had only recently developed basic faster-than-light travel, and everything I had heard suggested they were still fumbling with it, like children with a sharp tool. I pulled up the intelligence file on my personal display. It was thin, a few pages of biological data, a handful of intercepted communications, and a grainy image of the species. They were soft-looking things. No claws, no armored plates, no venom sacs. Blunt teeth designed for chewing plants and dead meat. Two eyes facing forward, which at least suggested predatory ancestry, but whatever predatory instinct they might have once possessed had clearly been buried under layers of civilization and sentiment. Torek allowed himself a thin smile. "Command wants the vessel captured. Standard protocol. Disable, board, catalog the crew for processing." It was called the UES Carthage. Its crew complement, based on heat signatures, was approximately 60 individuals. I had tracked vessels that could bend light around their hulls. This was not a hunt. This was an errand. Set pursuit course, I said. Standard formation. We will have this done before the next rest cycle. Torek relayed the order. The Pale Fang's engines hummed to life, and I felt the familiar vibration through the floor plates as we banked toward the target. Around me, my hunters took their stations with practiced ease. Dren, my sensor specialist, was already mapping the Carthage's probable escape routes. Syl and Maro were running weapon diagnostics. The others moved quietly, efficiently, the way they always did when a hunt began. I settled into my command chair and watched the distance counter on the main display tick downward. The gap between us and the human vessel was closing at a steady rate. At current speed, we would be within weapons range in roughly 8 hours. They have detected us, Dren reported from his station. The Carthage has altered course. It is increasing speed. Running, I said. Running, Dren confirmed. I leaned back in my chair and felt a familiar warmth in my chest, the warmth of certainty, of inevitability. This is what the Veshen were built for, not just the ships, not just the weapons, but us. Our bodies, our minds, our entire civilization was shaped around the pursuit. We were taller, faster, stronger than most species in this galaxy. Our eyes could track movement in near-total darkness. Our hearing could isolate a whispered word from across a crowded bay. And our stamina, our drive, the fire that burned in every Veshen hunter's blood, was something no other species had ever matched. We were not soldiers. We were not conquerors in the traditional sense. We were trackers. We followed. We pursued. That was the only way the universe made sense. You were either the thing that chased, or you were the thing that was caught. I had spent 40 years as the thing that chased, and I intended to spend 40 more. Krell, Dren said, about an hour into the pursuit. The Carthage is broadcasting something. A distress signal. No. It is music. I frowned. What? Dren adjusted his display and routed the signal to the bridge speakers. What came through was unlike anything I had heard before. A heavy, rhythmic pounding, layered with electronic tones, and something that might have been a human voice, though it was so distorted by processing and effects that it barely sounded organic. The rhythm was aggressive, relentless. It hit like a heartbeat that refused to slow down. Torek tilted his head. What is that? Human audio, Dren said. Recreational, I believe. Their species produces organized sound patterns for personal enjoyment. It sounds like mating noise, Torek said. 3 of the hunters near the back of the bridge barked out short laughs. Even I felt the corner of my mouth pull upward. The idea of these soft little creatures sitting in their tin-plated ship, blasting this thumping noise into the void, while a Veshen tracking cruiser closed in behind them, was genuinely amusing. Cut the feed, I said, still almost smiling. Stay on course. A vessel of this size would require 2 entry teams, one through the primary airlock, and one through whatever secondary access point we could identify. My hunters would move in pairs, sweeping compartment by compartment. The humans would be restrained, tagged, and moved to our holding bay. If they cooperated, the whole operation would take less than an hour. If they did not, it would take less than an hour and be somewhat louder. I was not concerned. I was not even particularly interested. My mind was already drifting toward what command might assign us next. There were rumors of a Palaxian splinter fleet regrouping near the Galactic Rim, and that would be a hunt worth waking up for. This, however, was beneath us. A survey ship, a species that had barely learned to leave its own solar system. I should have paid more attention. I should have read the file more carefully. I should have thought harder about why a species that had only just entered the galactic stage was already out here, alone, so far from its home, scanning dead rocks and collecting samples in territory it had no business being in. I should have asked myself, what kind of creature walks into the dark without fear? But I did not ask. I did not think. I simply watched the distance counter drop and waited for the inevitable moment when the Carthage would begin to slow, its engines straining, its crew panicking, its captain reaching for the communications console to beg for terms. That moment, I was certain was coming. I was certain of many things in those early hours. I was certain that the Carthage was a soft target. I was certain that its crew would break under pressure the way every species did. I was certain that by the time the next rest cycle came, I would have 60 new entries in the Dominion Slave Registry and a completed mission file on my desk. I was certain, above all, that I was the hunter and they were the prey, and that this was the natural order of things, as fixed and unchangeable as the pull of gravity around a star. In 40 years, I had never met prey that did not run, and I had never met prey that I could not catch. This, I told myself, would be no different. That was my first mistake. 20 hours later, I was still in my command chair, and the Carthage was still running. This should not have been possible. The Pale Fang was faster. Our engines were superior. Our power output dwarfed theirs. By every calculation, every model, every simulation Dren had run, we should have been within weapons range at least 4 hours ago. But the humans were doing something I had not expected. They were not simply running in a straight line. They were maneuvering, constant, unpredictable course adjustments that forced us to correct and recorrect our pursuit angle. They threaded through asteroid clusters, used the gravitational pull of dead moons to slingshot around corners, cut through radiation fields that made our sensors flicker and stutter. Each maneuver was different. Each one cost us time. Not much, individually. A few minutes here, half an hour there. But they added up. "They are thinking," Dren said, and there was a note in his voice I did not like. "Of course they are thinking," I replied. "They are running for their lives. Adrenaline sharpens even the dullest mind." But I was watching the display, and what I saw was not the erratic, desperate flailing of a panicked crew. It was something else. The maneuvers were too clean, too well timed. Someone aboard that ship was reading our approach vectors, anticipating our corrections, and exploiting every gap in our pursuit pattern with a precision that made me uncomfortable. I pulled up the intelligence file on humans again. I had barely glanced at it before. Now I read it more carefully. Bipedal locomotion, endothermic metabolism, omnivorous diet, moderate intelligence, highly social species with complex language and cultural structures. Nothing remarkable, nothing that explained what I was seeing. There was a note at the bottom of the file, flagged with a low-priority marker. It read, "Species demonstrates anomalous persistence. See Addendum 7. I did not need a research paper to catch a survey ship. That was my second mistake. My crew was still calm, still professional, but I could sense the first faint stirrings of confusion. This was supposed to be a simple chase. The target was supposed to tire. The target was supposed to break. Directly in our flight path, I looked at the display. A cloud of material was spreading across our approach vector. Metal fragments, broken equipment, structural components, and mixed in among the debris, tumbling slowly in the vacuum, were objects that took me a moment to identify. "Is that furniture?" Torek said. It was. Chairs, tables, storage containers. The humans had opened their cargo bays and dumped everything they could spare directly into our path. It was not a weapon. It would not damage us. But it was thick enough and spread wide enough that we could not simply fly through it at pursuit speed without risking hull impacts that could compromise our sensor arrays. I gave the order to slow down and navigate through. It took 6 hours. 6 hours of careful, grinding progress through a field of human garbage, while the Carthage pulled further away. By the time we cleared the last of it, we had lost nearly all the ground we had gained over the previous 20 hours. My hunters said nothing, but I could see it in their posture, in the way they glanced at each other across the bridge. This was not how a hunt was supposed to go. Torek asked. No, Dren said. It appears to be addressed directly to us. I nodded for him to play it. A voice filled the bridge. A human voice. Female. Based on the pitch and tonal quality, though I was no expert in human vocal biology. Female. Not frightened, not desperate, not shaking with the barely contained panic that I had heard from 100 other species at this stage of a chase. It was steady and clear and almost conversational, as if the speaker were discussing the weather on her homeworld, rather than running for her life from a Veshan tracking cruiser. Unidentified vessel, the voice said. This is Captain Lucy Harding of the UES Carthage. You have been following us for approximately 26 hours. I do not know what your intentions are, but I am asking you, clearly and directly, to stop. Turn your ship around and go home. I am asking you once. Please do not make me ask again. The message ended. Silence filled the bridge for a long moment. Then Torek laughed. It started as a low rumble in his chest and built into a full, open bark. Two of the hunters behind him joined in. Within seconds, half the bridge was making some form of amused noise. Play it again, Torek said, still laughing. Torek listened to it 3 times, each time finding some new detail to mock. The softness of the human voice, the absurdity of the phrasing, the idea that a captain of a defenseless survey ship was warning a Veshan cruiser to turn around. I laughed too. I remember that. I stood on my bridge, surrounded by the finest hunters in the Dominion, and I laughed at the small, soft voice of a creature who had no claws, no armor, no fangs, and no chance. But underneath the laughter, something cold moved in my gut. A sensation I could not name and did not want to examine. In 40 years of hunting across this galaxy, no species had ever warned me. The Rithani had pleaded. The Korvathi had screamed. The Palaxians had prayed to their silent gods. But none of them, not one, had looked back at me from the darkness of open space and calmly told me to stop. I pushed the feeling down. I told myself it was nothing. Fatigue, perhaps, or the irritation of a chase that was taking longer than it should. Hold course, I said. Increase power to engines. I want us within range before the next cycle. The Carthage entered a dense asteroid belt 3 hours later and cut all emissions. Every system, every signal, every trace of energy output went dark. The ship vanished from our sensors as completely as if it had never existed. Find them, I said. Dren worked his station with his usual speed and skill, but the asteroid belt was thick with mineral-rich rocks that scattered our scanning frequencies. The Carthage could be behind any one of 1,000 tumbling boulders, and without an active signal to track, we were searching blind. I ordered the Pale Fang into the belt at reduced speed, sensors sweeping in wide arcs. We moved carefully, methodically, the way we always did when a target went to ground. This was not the first time prey had tried to hide from us in a debris field. It never worked. The Veshan were patient when patience was required. We would scan every rock, check every shadow, and sooner or later, the Carthage would move or breathe, or make some tiny mistake that would light up our displays like a flare. 40 minutes into the search, Morrow's weapon console screamed a proximity alert. Something small and fast had appeared on sensors for barely a second before it detonated against our starboard hull. The blast was not large enough to breach the armor, but it shredded one of our external sensor arrays. Sparks fountained across the bridge. Morrow swore in the old tongue. Dren's display flickered and went partially dark. "What was that?" I demanded. Dren's fingers moved rapidly across his console. "A mine," he said. "Magnetic attachment. Proximity detonation." The humans laid a mine? It appears so. I stood very still for a moment. Around me, the bridge had gone quiet. No one was laughing now. No one was making jokes about mating noise or soft creatures. A mine. The humans, in the middle of running for their lives, had taken the time to stop, deploy an explosive device, attach it to an asteroid, and leave it in our path. Not a panicked, random act. A calculated, deliberate move, designed to damage our ability to see. Torek moved to stand beside me. He was not laughing anymore either. His eyes were on the sensor display, watching the gap where our starboard array used to be. A blind spot, a hole in our vision. "Krell," he said quietly, "are these humans smarter than the file suggests?" I looked at him. I looked at the display. I looked at the darkness of the asteroid belt pressing in around us, and I thought about a calm voice saying, "I am asking you once." "No," I said. What I did not say, what I was only beginning to feel in some deep and uneasy part of myself, was that intelligence was not what made these creatures dangerous. I know now that I should have stopped. I should have pulled the pale fang out of that asteroid belt, reversed course, and returned to Dominion space with a recommendation that Command send a full battle group if they wanted the Carthage so badly. I should have trusted the cold sensation in my gut, the one that had been growing since the moment I heard Lucy Harding's voice, and I should have recognized it for what it was. But I did not stop. I was Veshan. I was the senior tracker of the Dominion's fastest cruiser. I had never abandoned a hunt, and the idea of turning away from a species that could not even build a proper warship was so foreign to me that it did not register as an option. Stopping was something prey did. I was not prey. So we pressed deeper into the belt, scanning, searching, hunting in the dark while the Carthage sat somewhere among the rocks, silent and still and waiting. Our remaining sensors swept back and forth, but the mineral composition of the asteroids played havoc with our frequencies. Every scan returned a blur of false readings and ghost signals that Dren had to filter manually, one by one. My crew was professional, but I could see the strain settling into them. The Veshan are built for pursuit. Our blood runs hot when we chase. Our focus sharpens. Our muscles coil with a specific, targeted energy that drives us forward. But this was not a chase. The Carthage was not running. It was hiding, and hiding was something our biology did not reward. Without the thrill of pursuit to sustain them, my hunters were starting to feel the hours. Movements became slower. Responses came a half-beat late. Dren rubbed his eyes more often than usual, and Torek's jaw was tight, with a tension that had nothing to do with focus, and everything to do with frustration. I felt it too, the restless, itching discomfort of a predator that has lost sight of its prey. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to move faster, push harder, find the target and run it down. But there was nothing to run at. Just darkness and silence, and a million identical rocks. Then, 6 hours into the search, something moved. It moved fast, much faster than I expected, cutting across our bow so close that its engine wash left a faint heat trail on our forward hull plates. It fired nothing, deployed nothing. It simply flew past us, close enough that every hunter on the bridge flinched, and then vanished behind another cluster of rocks. The bridge erupted. 3 of my hunters were already reaching for weapon controls. Syl had her targeting display active and was sweeping for the shuttle's heat signature. Maro was shouting coordinates. "It is bait," I said. The bridge went quiet. Syl's hands hovered over her console. Maro closed his mouth. Torek looked at me. I paused. Something about what I had just said echoed in my mind in a way I did not like. Led us into this belt. The Carthage had not stumbled into this asteroid field by accident. It had not ducked into the first available hiding spot in a moment of desperation. It had run for more than 20 hours, maneuvering with precision, managing its speed and course with deliberate care. And it had come here, to this specific field, to this specific darkness. The realization settled over me like a cold mist. The Carthage had not been fleeing. It had been leading. I sat down in my command chair and pulled up the intelligence file on humans one more time. This time, I opened Addendum 7. The file was authored by a Veshan Deep Survey analyst named Corin, someone I had never met and would likely never meet. It was based on intercepted human media transmissions, biological sampling data from a long-range probe, and a brief, second-hand account from a Palaxian trader who had encountered humans at a neutral station. Humans, the file explained, were endurance predators. I knew what those words meant individually, but together, applied to this species, they took on a meaning I had not anticipated. On their homeworld, a planet called Earth, humans had not evolved as ambush predators or sprint hunters. They lacked the speed, the claws, the natural weaponry that most predatory species developed. Instead, they had evolved something else entirely, something that the analyst described with a clinical detachment that made the horror of it somehow worse. Humans chased their prey, not with speed, with time. On the plains of their homeworld, human hunters would identify a target animal, a fast, powerful creature that could outrun them over any short distance, and they would begin to follow it, walking, jogging, moving at a pace that was laughably slow compared to their quarry. The animal would sprint away, easily putting distance between itself and the pursuing humans, and the humans would keep coming. The animal would stop to rest, and the humans would appear on the horizon, still moving. The animal would run again. The humans would follow. Hours would pass. The animal would run. The humans would follow. The sun would cross the sky. The animal would run. The humans would follow. They did not need to be faster. They just needed to never stop. Eventually, after hours or sometimes days, the animal would collapse. Not from injury, not from attack, from exhaustion. From the pure, overwhelming terror of being followed by something that would not quit, would not tire, would not give up, would not stop no matter how far or how fast the prey ran. The humans would walk up to the fallen animal, breathing steadily, sweat cooling on their skin, and they would finish the hunt. I set the file down and stared at the bridge display. The pale fang drifted through the asteroid belt, half blind, searching for a ship that had gone silent. My crew was tired, frustrated. Their pursuit instincts were screaming with no outlet. And somewhere in the dark, 60 humans were sitting quietly, breathing steadily, waiting. I understood then, with a clarity that was almost physically painful, what was happening. The humans had recognized us. Not as a specific species, not as Veshan, but as a type. They had looked at the pale fang and seen a pursuit predator, something that chased its prey until the prey collapsed. And they had recognized it because they were the same thing. They were us. Reflected back through the lens of a completely different biology and a completely different world. But there was a difference. A critical, fundamental difference that I was only now beginning to grasp. The Veshan chased until we caught. We were built for the pursuit itself. The hot, rushing, forward momentum of the hunt. When the chase stalled, when the target went dark and the trail went cold, Our advantage evaporated. The humans did not have this limitation. They were patient. They could sit in the dark for as long as it took. They could wait while we wore ourselves down, burn through our energy and our focus and our morale, and then, when the moment was right, they would move. They were not running from us, they were hunting us, and they had been hunting us since the moment I gave the order to pursue. A sharp, concussive impact against our port side that knocked Syl out of her chair and sent Morrow grabbing for a handhold. "Second mine," Dren reported, his voice tight. No long-range communications, no ability to contact command, no way to call for reinforcements. We were alone in a dead asteroid belt, with a ship full of creatures that had just taken away our ability to ask for help. Then, the speakers crackled. A transmission on our short-range channel, the only one still functioning. Nobody laughed. I sat in my chair and listened to the silence that followed her words, and I felt something I had not felt since I was a juvenile on my first training hunt, something I had spent my entire adult life learning to suppress and ignore and overcome. I felt it in the base of my spine, and the back of my skull. I felt it in the slight tremor of my hands, and the sudden, acute awareness of every shadow on the bridge display. I felt it, and I hated that I felt it, and I recognized it for exactly what it was. I was afraid. I had spent my entire life as the thing that followed, the thing that never stopped. And now, sitting blind and deaf in the dark of a dead system, surrounded by silence and stone, and something that was watching me from the shadows, I understood what it felt like to be on the other side. The 52nd hour was when everything began to come apart. Not the ship, though the ship was in poor enough condition by then. We had lost 4 sensor arrays, our long-range communications, and a secondary power coupling that had been damaged by the second mine. The Pale Fang was still operational, still armed, still capable of moving through the belt, but she was wounded, limping, and every one of my hunters knew it. When the target is ahead and the chase is hot and the blood is pumping, there is no species in this galaxy that can match us for sheer, relentless, focused energy. We were shaped by evolution and refined by training to be the finest pursuit predators the stars had ever produced. But we were not built for this, sitting in darkness, waiting, scanning the same empty rocks for the dozenth time, and finding nothing, jumping at sensor ghosts and flinching at shadows, and watching the hours crawl past without a single sign of the enemy. This was not a hunt. This was a siege, and my hunters did not know how to handle a siege. Dren was the first to show cracks. His scanning had grown sloppy, patterns that overlapped and left gaps, and when I pointed this out, he snapped at me with a tone that no Veshan should ever use with a senior tracker. I let it go. He was exhausted. We all were. Syl and one of the junior hunters, a young male named Reth, got into a dominance dispute over a rest rotation. It escalated from sharp words to bared claws, before Torek stepped between them and shut it down with a look. But the damage was done. The tension on the bridge had shifted from the focused kind to the brittle kind, the sort of tension that did not sharpen your senses, but made you flinch at nothing and miss things that mattered. Neither had Torek. We could not afford to. Every time we closed our eyes, the thought was there, cold and persistent. They are watching. They are waiting. And when you rest, they will move. The humans, I was certain, were taking shifts. This was one of the things I had learned from the intelligence file, the parts I had forced myself to reread after the second mind took out our comms. Humans were social creatures who functioned in cooperative groups. They divided labor. They rotated responsibilities. While some worked, others rested, and the group as a whole maintained a level of alertness that no individual could sustain alone. The Carthage's crew of 60 was cycling through rest rotations, eating regular meals, keeping each other alert and functional with the kind of systematic, organized endurance that their species had been perfecting for thousands of years. I was beginning to understand the shape of the trap I was in. Not a physical trap, though the asteroid belt certainly limited my options. A strategic trap, a psychological trap. The humans had not beaten us with superior technology or firepower. They had beaten us by turning our greatest strength into our greatest weakness. The Veshan pursuit drive, the hot, restless energy that made us unstoppable in a chase, was tearing us apart from the inside now that there was nothing to chase. We were burning our own fuel, and the humans were sitting in the dark, patient and calm, watching us burn. Every few hours, a reminder arrived, just enough to keep us from settling, just enough to keep the fear alive. A small drone would appear on sensors for a few seconds, darting past the pale fang at high speed before vanishing behind an asteroid. Sometimes it would fire a single shot, a low-powered pulse that did barely any damage, but forced the whole bridge to scramble to battle stations. Sometimes it would simply pass by, silent and fast, reminding us that we were being watched. Once, a drone passed so close to the bridge viewport that I could see its running lights reflected in the glass. It was barely the size of my outstretched arms. A tiny machine, built for speed and nothing else. But the effect it had on my crew was devastating. Morrow cursed under his breath. Even Torik's jaw tightened. The humans were not trying to destroy us. They were not trying to board us or overpower us. They were picking at us. One small cut at a time, one lost sensor, one damaged relay, one moment of panic, 1 hour of sleepless tension. They were bleeding us slowly, and the most terrifying part was the patience of it. There was no urgency in their attacks, no desperation, just a steady, rhythmic, almost mechanical pattern of probing and withdrawing that felt less like combat and more like something measured and deliberate. I set a trap of my own. It was the only move I had left that felt active, that felt like something a hunter would do. If the humans were using our own energy emissions to track us, then going silent would force them to come looking. And when the next drone appeared, when it came close enough to investigate our apparently dead ship, we would hit it with everything we had. We waited for 4 hours. The bridge was dark, cold. My hunters sat at their stations in silence, barely breathing, watching the viewports with naked eyes since our displays were black. The drone came, a faint pinpoint of light moving among the asteroids, weaving between the rocks with the casual confidence of something that knew exactly where we were. It slowed as it approached the pale fang, hovered, came closer. "Now," I whispered. Morrow hit the emergency power switch. The shot caught the drone's propulsion system and sent it spiraling out of control, trailing sparks and fragments, until it crashed into the surface of a nearby asteroid. My hunters let out a collective exhale that was almost a cheer. It was the first moment of triumph we had felt in over 2 full cycles, and I could see the relief in their faces. We had struck back. We had shown that we were still dangerous. He took Reth, Sil, and a steady hunter named Voss, no relation to me despite the shared name, and they crossed to the asteroid in one of our boarding shuttles. I watched their progress on the short-range display, 4 bright dots moving across the gray surface of the rock toward the downed craft. They reached it quickly. The drone was small, crumpled from the impact, its outer shell cracked open. Torek's voice came through the comm. "It is empty," he said. "No pilot, automated, remote-controlled or pre-programmed." I felt the brief warmth of our small victory begin to fade. "There is something else," Torek continued. "There is a device attached to the central console. It appears to be a short-range transmitter. It activated when we approached." "Get away from it," I said, but I was already too late. A voice played from the device. Clear and unmistakable. Lucy Harding, speaking as if she were standing right beside Torek on the surface of that asteroid, as if she had known exactly what we would do, and exactly when we would do it. "Still here," she said. 2 words, that was all. No threats, no taunts. No demands, just a calm, quiet confirmation that she knew where we were, she knew what we were doing, and she was not going anywhere. Torek and his team returned to the ship in silence. I stood on the bridge and stared at the asteroid belt through the viewport. Somewhere out there, hidden among millions of rocks in a dead system around a burned-out star, was a ship full of creatures that should have been terrified. Creatures that should have been broken by now. Creatures that had no claws, no armor, no venom, no natural weapons of any kind. And they were taking us apart. Not with force, not with superior technology, with patience, with planning. With a cold, systematic, almost gentle persistence that felt less like a battle tactic and more like a natural force, like erosion, like gravity, like time itself. I thought about the intelligence file, about human hunters walking across the plains of their homeworld, following their prey for hours and days, never faster, never stronger, just always there, always coming, always present on the horizon. And then, while I was still standing there, while my crew was still scattered across the bridge in various states of exhaustion and defeat, the Carthage moved. It powered up without warning. One moment, the asteroid belt was dark and silent. The next, a blazing signature appeared on what was left of our sensor display. Close. Far too close. 800 meters off our port stern, buried among a cluster of rocks that we had scanned 3 times and found nothing. It had been there the whole time, sitting in the dark. Engines cold, systems dead, drifting among the stones like just another piece of debris. I say everything, but I should be clear about what that means. The Carthage was a survey ship. Its weapons were modest by any standard. A handful of pulse turrets designed for clearing small debris from flight paths. A single torpedo launcher that looked like it had been added as an afterthought. Point defense systems meant to swat away micrometeorites. None of it should have mattered. Against the Pale Fang's full armor and shielding, the Carthage's entire weapons complement would have been a nuisance at best. But the Pale Fang's armor was not full anymore. Our shields were running on reduced power. 4 sensor arrays were gone. Our port side was already damaged from the mines. And the Carthage was firing from 800 meters, point-blank range in space combat, pouring every joule of energy it had directly into our exposed engine section. The bridge shook so hard that I was thrown from my feet. The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing everything in a deep red glow. Alarms screamed from every station simultaneously. "Engine damage critical," Dren reported, and his voice was no longer tired or sloppy. It was sharp with genuine fear. "Primary and secondary drives are offline. Maneuvering thrusters at 30%. We are drifting." Morrow's hands flew across his console. 2 of our turrets were still operational, and he poured fire into the direction of the Carthage. But the human ship was already moving, pulling away from us with a burst of acceleration, using our own debris cloud as cover. By the time our shots reached its last position, it was gone, sliding back into the asteroid belt like a shadow, dissolving into deeper shadow. "12 hunters, the best the Dominion had ever produced." Dren was bleeding from a cut on his forehead where a console panel had shattered. Syl was holding her left arm against her chest at an angle that suggested something was broken. Reth was sitting on the floor, staring at nothing, his eyes wide and empty. Morrow was still firing, pounding his console with increasing desperation, sending shot after shot into the darkness, even though there was nothing there to hit. Torek stood beside me. He was still on his feet. He was always on his feet. But when he turned to look at me, I saw something in his eyes that I had never seen before. "What do we do?" he asked. I had no answer. For the first time in 40 years of hunting across this galaxy, I had nothing. No strategy, no instinct, no move to make. The Pale Fang was crippled. Our engines were gone. Our sensors were shredded. Our communications were dead. We were drifting in an asteroid belt in a system that no one visited, surrounded by millions of tons of rock, and somewhere in the darkness around us was a ship full of creatures who had just demonstrated, with devastating and methodical precision, that we had never been the hunters at all. We had been the lesson. The voice came through every speaker that still functioned on the Pale Fang. This is Captain Lucy Harding of the UES Carthage. Prepare to be boarded. I stood on the bridge in the red emergency light and listened to those words, and I felt the last trace of what I had once been. The proud, certain, unstoppable hunter collapse inside my chest like a structure that had been slowly losing its supports for days and had finally run out of things to lean on. Torek was already moving. Battle positions, he said to the crew, and his voice carried the same authority it always did, even if his eyes told a different story. Close quarters. This is where we fight. The humans are soft, they are small. In a confined space, with claws and strength, we have the advantage. I looked at him. I wanted to believe it. Every cell in my body wanted to believe that when the humans came through our airlocks, when the fighting moved from the vast, patient distances of space into the tight corridors of my ship, the natural order would reassert itself. We were Veshan. We were taller, stronger, faster. Our claws could shred metal. Our reflexes were 4 times quicker than anything in the human biological profile. In a straight fight, one-on-one, no Veshan had ever lost to any species we had encountered. Get everyone armed, I said. Seal the bridge. Barricade the corridor junctions. If they want this ship, they will earn it. My crew moved with a renewed energy that surprised me. Perhaps it was desperation, or perhaps it was relief. After 60 hours of sitting in the dark, being picked apart by an enemy they could not see, the prospect of a direct fight was almost welcome. This, at least, was something they understood. This was claws and muscle, and the hot, immediate reality of combat. 8 of us were still fit to fight. Dren's head wound was superficial, and he refused to leave his station. Syl had bound her injured arm tight against her body and picked up a sidearm with her remaining hand. Only Reth and 2 others were too badly shaken or wounded to stand. We moved them to the secondary hold and sealed the door. I positioned my hunters at key points throughout the ship, 2 at the primary airlock, 2 at the secondary, Torek and myself at the bridge entrance, 2 more roving between positions, ready to reinforce wherever the humans breached. The Carthage docked with the Pale Fang's starboard airlock at 0347 ship time. I heard the magnetic clamps engage, felt the subtle vibration through the hull as the 2 ships locked together. Then silence. A long, measured silence that stretched for minutes. They were making us wait. Of course they were. Then the airlock blew. Not inward, the way a battering ram would force a door. The humans did something to the locking mechanism from the outside, something quick and technical, and the door simply opened. No explosion, no drama, just a soft hiss of equalizing atmosphere, and then movement. They came in quietly. They did not charge. They did not announce themselves the way a Veshan hunting party would, with the traditional scream of challenge that was supposed to freeze prey in its tracks. They moved in silence, or something close to it. Quick, precise movements that I could track on my internal display as clusters of 4 heat signatures advancing corridor by corridor. Teams of 4. They fight in groups, I said to Torek. He nodded. He had noticed it too. Each team of 4 moved as a single organism, each member covering a specific arc, each one positioned to support the others. There were no stragglers, no heroes, no individual hunters testing their strength against the enemy. Just tight, disciplined units that flowed through the corridors like water finding the path of least resistance. The first contact happened at the secondary airlock. My 2 hunters there, Marrow and a veteran named Kess, had positioned themselves on either side of the corridor, ready to ambush the first humans who came through. I heard it through the internal comm, a sudden burst of noise, bright flashes that overloaded the corridor's lighting, a thick cloud of something that Marrow later described as smoke so dense he could not see his own claws. The humans had thrown devices ahead of them, things that produced blinding light and deafening sound and thick, choking smoke, and they had done it before they even entered the corridor. Marrow charged through the smoke. He was a veteran of 30 years, one of the finest close-quarters fighters in the Dominion. He was fast, powerful, and utterly committed. He found a human in the smoke, grabbed for them, felt his claws close around a shoulder. The human was small, barely reaching Marrow's chest. For one heartbeat, Marrow had the advantage. Then 3 more humans appeared around him. They did not attack him individually. They worked together. One struck his knee from the side. When he buckled, another applied a restraining device to his wrists. The third covered him with a weapon pointed directly at his head. The whole sequence took perhaps 4 seconds. Kess did not even get that far. She came around the corner and found herself facing 2 humans who had already taken up positions covering her approach. They did not shoot. One of them said something, a single word that she did not understand, and pointed at the ground. When Kess hesitated, the second human activated another of those light and sound devices at her feet. Kess, blinded and disoriented, dropped to her knees, and they restrained her before she recovered. I listened to this from the bridge. Maro and Kess, two of my best, taken down in less than 30 seconds. Not because the humans were stronger, they were not. Not because the humans were faster, they were not. But because the humans did not fight the way we expected. They did not meet strength with strength. They used tools, coordination, and the environment itself as weapons. They fought like a pack, not of individuals, but of interlocking parts, each one covering the weaknesses of the others. The same pattern repeated at the primary airlock. My two hunters there held out longer, nearly a full minute, because the corridor was narrower and harder to maneuver in. Light devices, smoke, precise, coordinated movement. The humans never engaged one-on-one. They never gave a Veshan hunter the kind of fair, direct confrontation where our physical superiority would matter. Every engagement was 4-on-1. Every angle was covered. Every retreat was blocked before it was attempted. In 90 seconds, I had lost 4 hunters. 3 were restrained and conscious. Kess had been knocked unconscious during the struggle, but was breathing steadily. The roving pair, Syl and a hunter named Deck, tried to ambush one of the human teams from behind. Syl made it within arm's reach of the rearmost human before the team reacted. What happened next was so fast that even reviewing the internal sensor logs later, I had difficulty following it. The rearmost human dropped to one knee, clearing the line of fire for the human behind him. That human fired a restraining projectile that caught Deck in the chest and expanded into a binding mesh. Simultaneously, the 2 forward humans turned and covered Syl. She had her claws extended, was already mid-swing when a device hit the wall beside her and erupted in a burst of sound so loud that it rattled her bones. She staggered. The humans closed in, working together, and put her down. 6 hunters in under 3 minutes. Torek and I stood at the bridge door. We were the last line. Behind us, the bridge was sealed, the remaining crew inside. Ahead of us, the corridor stretched into the red-lit darkness of the ship, and somewhere in that darkness, 12 humans were moving toward us, with the patient, systematic inevitability that I had come to recognize as their defining characteristic. "Torek," I said. "I know," he replied. We did not speak further. There was nothing left to say. We were Veshan hunters, the finest our species had ever produced, and we were about to fight a battle we both knew we could not win. Not because we were weak, not because we were cowardly, but because the creatures coming down that corridor had already beaten us in every way that mattered, and the close-quarters fight we had pinned our last hopes on was just another arena where they outperformed us through coordination and planning and the unshakable refusal to fight fair. The humans appeared at the far end of the corridor, 4 of them, moving in their tight formation, weapons up, each one covering a different angle. They advanced slowly, carefully. There was no rush. There was never any rush with these creatures. I saw the one in front clearly for the first time. A human, medium height by their species standards, wearing a tactical suit that covered most of their body. Their face was visible through a transparent visor, and what I saw there was the thing that finally broke something inside me. I saw focus, calm, steady, measured attention, no aggression, no bloodlust, no excitement, just the quiet concentration of a professional performing a task they had trained for and knew how to execute. These creatures were not enjoying this. They were not taking pleasure in our defeat. They were simply doing what needed to be done, the way a machine does what it is designed to do, with no more emotional investment than a Veshon gives to breathing. Torek stepped forward. He was going to fight. I knew it. He would not surrender, could not surrender, any more than a river could decide to flow uphill. No, I said. He looked at me. His eyes were burning. His muscles were coiled. Every fiber of his body screamed for the fight, the direct, honest, physical confrontation that our species was built for. No, I repeated. It is over. The lead human stopped 5 paces away. Behind the visor, a pair of eyes regarded me with an expression I could not read. The human lowered one hand from their weapon, slowly, and made a gesture that I later learned meant, stand down. I unclenched my claws. I straightened my spine. I looked at the human, this small, soft, breakable creature that had just dismantled the finest hunting crew in the Veshan Dominion, and I said the word I had never spoken in 40 years of service. The remaining crew was taken without resistance. The humans moved through my ship with the same quiet efficiency, securing each compartment, checking each room, ensuring that every Veshan was accounted for. They were thorough, professional, and then they did something that I did not expect. They helped us. A human medic, a young woman with short brown hair and steady hands, knelt beside Kess and examined her head wound. She worked quickly, cleaning the injury, applying a bandage, checking Kess's pupils for signs of deeper damage. When she was satisfied, she moved to Dren and attended to the cut on his forehead. She spoke to him as she worked, softly, in a language he could not understand, but the tone was unmistakable. It was the tone of someone providing comfort. Another human brought containers of water and nutrient packs. He set them down in front of my restrained hunters and opened the containers for them, since their hands were bound. When Morrow stared at him without moving, the human pushed the water closer and mimed the act of drinking. The species we had come to enslave was tending to our wounds and offering us food, and the sheer, disorienting absurdity of it left me unable to form coherent thoughts for several minutes. She was shorter than I expected, much shorter. Standing in front of me, the top of her head barely reached my chest. She had dark hair pulled back from her face, and brown eyes that moved across the bridge with a quick, assessing intelligence that missed nothing. She was not what I had imagined. In my mind, over the course of those endless hours in the asteroid belt, I had built the human captain into something larger than life. A strategic genius, a predatory mastermind, a figure of terrifying competence who had orchestrated our destruction with cold, calculated precision. The woman standing before me was none of those things. She was ordinary, unremarkable, the kind of person who, on any civilized station in the galaxy, would disappear into a crowd without a second glance. She had no claws, no fangs, no armor, no physically imposing feature of any kind. She was just a person, small and soft and utterly fragile, and she had just brought the Veshan Dominion's finest tracking crew to its knees. "My name is Lucy Harding," she said. Your crew will be transferred to neutral authorities for repatriation to your government. All of you, unharmed. The translator in my ear rendered her words into Vishan with flat, mechanical precision. I heard each one clearly. I understood each one individually. But together, they formed a sentence that my mind refused to accept. It was not pity, not contempt, not the gloating triumph of a victor over a fallen enemy. It was something quieter than all of those things. Something sadder. "We are not like you, Krell," she said. She used my name, which meant she had accessed our ship's personnel files at some point during the engagement. "We do not take slaves. We do not keep trophies. When a fight is over, it is over." "On Vesha," I said, "the defeated are property of the victor. That is the natural order." She leaned back in the chair and crossed her arms. "On Earth," she said, "we tried that. For a very long time, thousands of years, we hurt each other in ways I hope you never have to understand. And then, slowly, painfully, over centuries of suffering and learning, and choosing to be better than our worst instincts, we stopped." She paused. I said nothing. "We are not predators, Krell. And we are not prey. We are something your file on us did not have a word for. We are people who choose. We choose to fight when we have to. We choose to stop when the fighting is done. And we choose, right now, to let you go." I stared at her. This small, ordinary, impossibly calm human who had just delivered the most complete defeat of my career, and who was now sitting across from me, offering me my freedom, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "If we come again," I said, "if the Dominion sends a fleet, what will you do?" Lucy Harding looked at me for a long moment, then she smiled. It was not a threatening smile. It was tired, worn. The smile of someone who had been awake for 60 hours and had spent every one of those hours making decisions that could have killed her and her entire crew. "The same thing we always do," she said. "We will ask you to stop, once." She stood up. She looked at the bridge of my ship, at the damaged consoles and the flickering emergency lights, and the restrained hunters who were being fed and bandaged by her crew. Then she looked back at me. "Get some rest, Krell," she said. "It is a long tow to the station." She left the bridge. Her footsteps faded down the corridor, soft and steady, the footsteps of a creature that had never needed claws or armor or fangs, because it had something far more dangerous. Patience, cooperation, and the capacity to choose mercy when every advantage lay with cruelty. The tow took 11 days. During those 11 days, the humans of the Carthage fed us, treated our injuries, repaired the life support systems on the Pale Fang so that we could breathe and stay warm, and generally behaved as if we were not the crew of a vessel that had been sent to hunt them down and drag them into slavery. A human engineer named Nate Collins spent an entire afternoon repairing our water recycling unit because, as he explained through the translator with a casual shrug, you need clean water the same as we do. The young medic, whose name I learned was Sophie Grant, checked on Kess twice a day. By the fourth day, Kess was speaking to her, short, halting exchanges in broken trade language, that Sophie supplemented with hand gestures and a patience that seemed, like everything else about these humans, to be bottomless. Danny Webb, the pilot who had flown the Carthage through the asteroid belt with such devastating precision, stopped by the hold where we were kept and attempted to explain a human game involving a folded piece of paper and numbered flaps. Torek stared at him without comprehension. Danny tried again, slower, with more gestures. Torek continued to stare. The humans transferred us to the station's administrative authority, filed a formal report, and departed. Captain Harding did not come to say goodbye. She did not need to. Everything she had to say, she had already said. I filed my report. I stood before command and told them everything. The pursuit, the asteroid belt, the mines, the drones, the systematic, patient, devastating strategy that a crew of 60 soft, clawless, breakable creatures had used to dismantle the finest tracking team the Dominion had ever fielded. Command was furious. Furious at my failure. Furious at the damage to the Pale Fang. Enough firepower to crack a moon. They wanted to find Earth and teach these humans the price of defiance. For the first time in my life, I argued against a hunt. I stood before the commanders of the Dominion, my superiors, the beings who had shaped my entire existence. And I told them they were wrong. I told them what I had seen, what the humans had done, what they were capable of. Not because of their technology, not because of their weapons, but because of something inside them, something that no scanner could measure and no file could capture. A quality that made them, pound for pound, cell for cell, the most dangerous species I had ever encountered. Command dismissed me. Not formally. They did not strip my rank or remove my commission. But they stopped listening, and in the Dominion, that amounts to the same thing. Krell, they decided, had been broken by a minor engagement with a primitive species. His judgment could no longer be trusted. They were right about one thing. I was broken. But not in the way they thought. I was changed. I retired from active service 8 months later. I returned to Vesha. I took a dwelling far from the capital, in the low hills near the southern sea, where the wind carries the smell of salt and the nights are long and quiet. And I began to write. I am writing now. This account, this record, this warning. Not for command. They will not read it. Not for the Dominion. They will not listen. I am writing for whoever comes after. For whatever Veshan tracker or hunter or commander receives the order to pursue a human ship and thinks, as I once thought, that it will be easy. I want them to know what I know. I want them to understand what I understand. I have hunted across this galaxy for 40 years. I have broken worlds and bent civilizations to the Dominion's will. I tell you now, with the clarity of one who has seen the truth and been changed by it forever. Do not hunt the humans. They are not the fastest. They are not the strongest. They are not the most technologically advanced. By every metric we use to measure threat, they should be unremarkable, average, forgettable. But they do not stop. They do not break. They do not give up, and they do not give in. And when you think you have them cornered, when you think the chase is over and the prey is yours, they will turn around. And they will look at you with those calm, patient, steady eyes, brown and blue and green and gray, ordinary eyes in ordinary faces, set in heads that hold minds so stubbornly, impossibly, magnificently relentless, that 40 years of hunting across this galaxy did not prepare me for the shock of encountering them. And you will understand, as I did, standing on the bridge of my broken ship while a small, soft, smiling woman offered me my freedom and my life, that you were never the hunter. You were the lesson. And the lesson is this: some prey bites back. Some prey thinks. Some prey works together with a coordination that turns 60 fragile individuals into a single, unstoppable force. And some prey, the most dangerous kind of all, has the power to destroy you completely, and instead chooses to let you go. That is what the humans are. That is what they do. And if you are wise, if you have even a fraction of the intelligence the Dominion claims to possess, you will read this account, and you will do what I should have done 60 hours into the chase. when a calm voice on an open channel asked me to stop. You will turn your ship around. You will go home. And you will thank whatever gods you believe in that the humans gave you the chance.